Oh. Let me turn on this light before these children get in here and want me to keep it off.
You don't want the light on? I mean, off?
No, I think they were like, we watched a video in here. I think that they were like getting sleepy.
Oh,
If I
sure.
have it off.
There's little kids.
No, I don't teach little kids.
Who teaches anything?
Julius Hunter will be in here. He's not actually in my class, but he just hangs out in here. Madison. I think they're my only in-person people.
I just wanted to get help on these kids.
Yeah. Well, I got like until class starts. Hello. Woo! Oh, I just accidentally turned on my camera and got frightened by myself. Oops. Okay, what can we look at?
I'm trying to figure out which one is the shortest I can hear you get done by before you have to start.
You know what else? For the setting analysis, we did that in class together. I don't know if you remember, but I was like, hey, Randall, you writing your answers down? And you weren't. But you could go back and look at the Zoom and get the answers from that. If I can figure out what day that was. Hi. Yes. And then we looked at the PowerPoint together, which is where we got the answers from. What frickin' day was that? Setting. Friday the 5th or something. Friday the 5th. Okay, let me see if this is it. What?
Competitions are not.
Oh, that's just me.
Jesus in here?
No. But I'm going to send you the link to this Zoom so that you can go through it and look at the answers. Except I just did the wrong thing. Oops. No, hang on. Kids are weird. Randall Wade. Boop. All right. So you can find the answers for that. So we really did it together. Didn't we start the analysis questions together the other day? Did we not? This thing? Did we not start that together? Doesn't look familiar?
I mean, it looks familiar. I don't remember.
Okay. Maybe we were going to, and then class got started. So, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and mirror my displays.
No, I think we did start with this.
Didn't we?
I think Zeno was so determined because Ethan was hanging out with her so much.
Yeah, it was really obvious that he had feelings for her. Is it not very cold in here to you guys?
I can't wait.
Oh my gosh. It's like, last time I checked, it was like 67 degrees on that thing. Hey, you guys.
Hi.
Oh, you might have to just make a copy. How's everybody's weekend?
It was good.
Good. Ooh. Julius is here. Kayla is virtual. Madison is here. Not here. virtual. All right. Okay, hopefully everybody read or listened to Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been, which is the weirdest story ever. Oh, I just saw your chat. I just opened the chat, so I saw these comments, amazing and pretty good, and I was like, the story? It is, right? But I recognize that you're talking about your weekend. We have kind of a lot of stuff to get through today with lecture stuff. Like there's an article to read first, and then a PowerPoint to go through. So I won't spend too long just kind of summing up. But basically, this story is this young, very vain girl named Connie, who is 16 or 17, I think. Briefly has like not even an encounter. She just sees this guy while she's out on like a double date. And then the next day, her parents and her sister go to a barbecue, and the guy shows up at her house and says a lot of weird, creepy stuff to her. And then is like, you need to take a ride with me. I'm going to do all kinds of stuff to you. And she's like, no, you're crazy. Like, my parents are going to be back any minute. And he says even weirder stuff about like, no, your parents are at a barbecue and they're not going to be home for another couple of hours. And this is what your sister was wearing. And like, just has all this information that there's no way he could really have. And in the end, he comes into her house, which he's like, if you make me come into your house, I don't have to keep my promise to be nice anymore and to not hurt you. Or if you call the police, then I don't have to keep my promise. And she does go inside. She does try to call the police, and he comes in after her, and maybe some violent stuff happens. Like there's a lot of stuff in this story that it's like, what's happening? Or like, is something violent happening? There's a lot of like reading between the lines in this story. But at the end, she goes with him, and it seems like not a great situation. Let me go ahead and get started on this stuff. I could talk about this story for a very long time, but let's go ahead and look at what Trident wants us to see about it, and then maybe I'll give you some more info, some more of my own opinions about things. Why is this telling me I have 2 notifications? There are no notifications. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to pull these open on my computer, but for the record, I know, in the content tab on D2L, week 4, part 1 is where you will find this stuff. Yeah, we don't want that. It's obviously got the prompt and the quiz, but we're going to look at the critical analysis, and then we're going to look at Where Are You Going, lecture notes, and prompt. But I have them open on my computer and don't want to download another copy. So I'll pull this open, and then I'll share my screen with you folks. Joyce Carol Oates, I follow her on Twitter. She's interesting. Like last year, this is so random, and I'm sorry because y'all probably don't care about this, but she's like a renowned author. She's a strange older lady. I've met her once. She's very strange in person too, but she like hikes a lot, and she like just like explores in the woods, and she'll like post tweets of herself doing that. But at some point during the quarantine, I know this has been like in the last year, I guess she got like in the woods, she got some kind of like fungus on her foot or something, or like some kind of like poisonous plant rubbed up on her foot. And so like I went onto Twitter, and Joyce Carol Oates was trending, and I was like, oh God, please don't tell me that she's dead. And it's like, no, they're just horrifying pictures of her foot. I assume that it's better now, but it was gross. It was really bad. Just wanted to share that little story. Okay, Let me share my screen. And for the record, and I think that this is going to give us some background and then also some possible interpretations of this story. But there are a lot of interpretations to this story. There are a lot of different ways to read it. In fact, don't tell him I said a nice thing about him, but Bryce actually wrote a paper about this last year that was like looking at it in a different way. And like, I don't think it's how the author intended it, but he like came up with all this evidence for how like the character of Arnold Friend was representative of like getting into a drug habit. And it was really good. It was really like insightful. There was one part of it that was stupid and I told them so, but overall I was really impressed. So there's so many different ways you can read this story. But we're going to look at this thing that got published first in Bloom's Literature, give you some background, and see about some possible interpretations of it. The tendency among Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been commentators is to equate Arnold Friend with the devil himself and to mysticize the story into a dream allegory. This interpretation may have been largely inspired by the author's remark that Arnold Friend is a fantastic figure. He is deaf, he is the elf knight of the ballads, he is the imagination, he is a dream, he is a lover, a demon, and all that. There's a lot of weight for one short man to carry. Arnold Friend is a fantastic character, but only in the slang sense of the word. Such sweeping pronouncements as Oates, especially when a nonchalant and all that is appended, should be viewed with skepticism, and I suspect that the author was seizing upon an after-the-fact opportunity to make her story seem more literary than it really is. If so, I don't understand why. Joyce Carol Oates should have been content to let Where Are You Going stand on its solid realism. So the argument here is that the author is saying that there's like some sort of spectacular stuff going on, and he's saying, or whoever wrote this is saying, we should just like take it as it is. Julius.
Have you seen the last season of American Horror Story?
What?
Have you seen the last season of American Horror Story?
No, I've actually only seen the first season.
Maddie, have you?
What?
Have you?
I've only seen the witches.
Which what's the like subtitle of that one?
I don't think so.
Like the first one's Murder House, there's Coven. What's this one?
Something about the 80s,
80s?
like some cabin,
Oh.
some camp. Yeah, camp something
Oh,
wood or something.
interesting.
Anyways, one of the main antagonists remind me of this character.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
like,
cool. That
like
makes me
a
want to
lot
watch it.
of black hair.
Yeah.
And like kind of a weird grin.
Huh.
Devil associated.
Interesting. Well, that makes me really want to watch it, and I might. I don't have a show that I'm watching right now, so.
It's a good season. And it's pretty uncomfortable at first.
That's okay.
It's like really uncomfortable.
Okay.
But yeah, pretty good.
What do you think the best season of that show is?
I don't know. I only saw the whole of the last one and like bits of the one before that,
Okay.
and maybe the one before that.
For those of you who cannot hear Julius, he was saying that the last season of American Horror Story, yes, one of the villains reminds him of Arnold Friend, which that's kind of cool. I don't actually remember if this article that we're looking at says anything more about this, but you guys might remember it was the story is dedicated to Bob Dylan,
Yeah.
and he's really like described as looking a lot like Bob Dylan. Okay, so it should stand on solid realism. That Oates is operating in a realistic mode is indicated by Tom Quirk, whoever he is, in an article so revealing that its main details are worth repeating here. Quirk convincingly demonstrates that Oates closely modeled her story on Charles Schmitz's murder of Eileen Rowe in the fall of 1965, just prior to the 1966 publication of the story in Epic. Though the murder was publicized in several popular news magazines, Quirk even identifies the one which Oates most likely used, noting that the life account alone mentioned that Eileen, like Connie, has just washed her hair before her assailants arrived. Assailants is also revealing in that Schmidt murdered 2 other young girls, but the killing of Rowe was the only one in which he had an accomplice. Schmidt and his friend John Saunders raped and murdered Eileen Rowe, then beat her to death and buried her in the desert outside Tucson, Arizona. Arnold Friend's creepy cohort Ellie Oscar was no doubt suggested to Oates by John Saunders. Ellie is still like the one character in this story that I'm like, what is this supposed to mean? I don't really get what Ellie is all about. The parallels between Where Are You Going and the Rowe account are so numerous that Oates's borrowing is unquestionable. Also, I think she's admitted that. For instance, Eileen was 15 at the time of her death, the same age as Connie. Either by accident or by design, the murderers caught at her home alone on a night when her mother was working, just as Connie is found in helpless circumstances in her own house. But the most telling evidence is how faithfully Oates duplicated the bizarre facts about Charles Schmidt in her characterization of Arnold Friend. When Schmidt was arrested, he was 23, but still haunting teen hangouts. Creepy. Like Friend, he was short, 5'3", and muscular, and he tried to appear younger and to disguise his lack of height by dyeing his hair black, wearing pancake makeup, and stuffing rags and even crumpled cans into his black leather boots. He was also a rock and roll fan and identified Elvis as his idol. Schmidt, like Arnold, even drove a garish gold-colored car. So it does sound like she's taken a lot of stuff from, yeah, I know it is graphic. I feel like I'm kind of desensitized to that kind of stuff now because I like read and watch so much true crime and stuff. But I think she's admitted that she sort of based it off of this particular murderer. And all of that stuff, obviously, like there's a huge parallel, especially like stuffing his boots so he appeared taller and stuff. They sort of mentioned that. But while the fact that Oates copied many of her details from the account of an actual murder suggests a realistic story, it does not prove the fact that she did not transform Charles Schmidt into a mystical Arnold Friend, and in doing so, mythologize Where Are You Going? What proves that she didn't is the story's consistent naturalism. Absolutely nothing occurs that can't be explained in purely literal terms or that isn't best explained so. Like all good stories, Where Are You Going resonates in the mind, but its style is realistic, not allegorical. I don't know. Its principal characters are not personifications of abstract qualities, but a demented killer and a giddy teenage girl. Arnold Friend does not appear in a dream, but at Connie's kitchen door. I'm not going to keep stopping, or at least I'm going to try not to, but I think it's really interesting and sort of like presumptuous that the dude who wrote this is like, yes, I know that the author herself said that he represents the devil and all of this other stuff, but I don't agree. I feel like we've kind of said that it's fine to interpret stuff in a way that the author didn't necessarily mean, as long as you can back it up with stuff from the text. But I feel like it's a different ballgame to be like, no, your interpretation of your own story is not correct. That's kind of not okay. Joan D. Winslow would agree with this view. Winslow argues that Connie's repressed fear, uncertainty, and guilt finally emerge in the shape of Arnold Friend, and says that the knowing reader can easily identify him as the devil. But Connie's problem is that she has no sexual fear, uncertainty, or guilt, not even in repressed form. There's nothing psychologically complex about her. She's simply a pathetic teenager who isn't being reared very well. Her church is a bright lit, fly-infested drive-in restaurant, and her inspirational music is mind-numbing rock and roll, both middle-class cliches of the early 60s. Connie's father doesn't care where she has been, and her mother, who the story implies was much like Connie when she was younger, takes only a perfunctory interest in where she's going. When Connie blithely distances herself from the disreputable Pettinger girl, Connie's mother, who noticed everything and knew everything, pretends to accept her daughter's nice girl, bad girl distinction. Connie thinks that it was maybe cruel to fool her so much, but she isn't fooled. She just doesn't care. This is the stuff of sociological naturalism, not psychosexual allegory. Yeah, but which one's more interesting? Come on. Winslow sees Where Are You Going as a dream allegory comparable to Hawthorne's Young Goodman Brown. I love Young Goodman Brown. I think we read that in AP before we did the Hawthorne versus Hemingway thing when Like the dude goes out into the woods in the middle of the night and there's like a witchcraft meeting, and I don't know if you guys remember this or not, but he like wakes up in the woods and like his wife had been about to like make a pact with the devil, and everyone he knew who was a good person was there. And so he wakes up and he's like, was that a dream or did that really happen? And we don't know the answer to that question, but it ruins his life anyway, because he's like, I can't trust any of these people. Anyway, I don't know if you guys remember that story, but I think we did read it. Yeah. The stories differ markedly in style. The dream possibility is pronounced in Hawthorne's story. Had Goodman Brown fallen asleep in the forest and only dreamed a wild dream of a witch meeting? And several of its events, such as the vanishing of the satanic initiation rite, cannot be explained except in terms of dream or fantasy. No such narrative signals or unreal occurrences appear in Oates' story. Connie exists in a dreamlike state, but never in a dream. Her mother's right when she says that Connie's mind was all filled with trashy daydreams. Connie is never more than half awake to reality, but this is her natural mental state, and not a temporary psychic phenomenon that conjures up Arnold Friend. Connie rides home from the mall, sleepy and pleased because she has sated her appetite for cheap diversion for another night. Her dreams are mundane teenage boy-girl reveries, enhanced by the hypnotic music she listens to constantly. She spends most of her waking hours dreaming about the boys she met, but all the boys fell back and dissolved into a single face that was not even a face, but an idea, a feeling, mixed up with the urgent, insistent pounding of the music, which is merely to say that Connie, like many teenagers, is in love with love, or maybe just sex. Not only is there nothing remotely fabulous about such daydreaming, but it may be inspired by a reality-based erotic impulse. Her mind slipped over onto thoughts of the boy she had been with the night before and how nice he had been, how sweet it always was. There is a good possibility that it, in the previous sentence, refers to sexual intercourse. That Arnold Friend likes to think his victim is a virgin doesn't mean that this is so. Connie is in her characteristic semi-conscious state on the fateful Sunday of Arnold Friend's visit. She has sat with her eyes closed in the sun, dreaming and dazed with the warmth about her. But she's merely indulging in her routine trashy daydreams about boys when Arnold arrives. He's not a dream, but a brutal awakening. Connie's dreamlike state at the end of the story is of another type. It is the nightmare sense of unreality of a person who knows she is about to be murdered. She thought, I'm not going to see my mother again. She thought, I'm not going to sleep in my bed again. Her final trance-like compliance signals the acceptance of the inevitable. The atrocious thing that is happening to her renders her empty. She is in effect out of body from despair and shock, which I would imagine is probably what it's like when you get murdered. I don't know. I've never been murdered. She watched herself push the door slowly open, watching this body and this head of long hair moving out into the sunlight where Arnold Friend waited. Connie's psychological reaction to her impending death is realistically detailed and completely believable. Allegorizing it into a mere bad dream not only strains the text, but takes the edge off the genuine horror of Connie's fate. I have questions for this argument. Just as Connie is no more and no less than the pathetic girl who's about to be murdered, Arnold Friend is simply the sick killer who's going to murder her. He doesn't represent anything except the kind of creep a girl like Connie, or even a girl unlike Connie, might have the bad luck to attract. The story even implies that Arnold has killed or at least raped before. The numbers 33, 19, 17 painted on the car may be a secret code, as the miscreant himself boasts, but they are not demonic numerology. The numbers most likely are the ages of Arnold Friend's previous victims, suggested to Oates by the ages, 17, 15, and 13, of the girls killed by Charles Schmidt. I've never heard this theory before. This is so interesting to me. Assuming that Friend has listed his victims in chronological order, the number sequence is revealing. He started with a woman near his own age, dropped down to the last teen year, then picked a girl 2 years younger than the previous one, which parallels Schmidt's youth fetish. Connie fits perfectly into the descending 2-year age difference of 19, 17, and now 15. Excuse me. Schmidt's 13-year-old would be next for Arnold. For Friend's secret code, Oates used 2 of the 3 ages of Charles Schmidt's victims, all of whom were 2 years apart in age. That Arnold Friend seems to possess satanic powers in the form of supernatural knowledge of Connie and her family is also explicable on a purely realistic level. Even Tom Quirk credits him with intimate, even satanic knowledge of her family's doings. But Arnold really has no supernatural powers. He knows nothing about Connie that he could not have observed, learned by asking around, or guessed. That he knows about that old woman down the road, the one with the chickens, suggests that he has cased the neighborhood, that he doesn't know she's recently died. Dead? What? Suggests the opposite of satanic perception. It is true that when Connie tries to scare him off by saying that her father is due home, Arnold knows that the family is at a barbecue at Aunt Tilly's, but when Connie asks him how he knows this, his halting reply again suggests no mystical knowledge. Right now, they're drinking. As Arnold continues, Oates' stage directions make it clear that he's improvising. Sitting around, he said, vaguely squinting, as if he were staring all the way to town and over to Aunt Tilly's backyard. Since Aunt Tilly's house is in town, it's quite possible that the cruising Arnold friend has previously observed Connie's family, and maybe even Connie there. Oates' locale seems a much smaller place than Charles Schmidt's Tucson, a fact that would explain how Arnold has even learned the name of Connie's aunt. Then he says something which reveals he has in fact watched the family depart. Yeah, sitting around. There's your sister in a blue dress, huh? And high heels. If he has been this close, he could have overheard the family's destination and the aunt's name. The rest of Arnold Friend's special knowledge is simply guesswork, not all of it's correct. He speculates that a family cookout is likely to have corn on the cob, it may or it may not, and that there's a fat woman an ideal which startles Connie. What fat woman? Connie cried. Friend, the omniscient devil replies, how do I know what fat woman? To complete this hint that Arnold's powers are totally fake, there isn't even a fat woman at the gathering. Oh, that's Mrs. Hornsby, the shaken girl replies, then adds, who invited her? Arnold's scam has worked so well that Connie imagines an outsider at the barbecue and then wonders why she's there. Neither does Arnold Friend possess any supernatural knowledge about Connie. He boasts to her that I know your name and all about you, and then proves it by reciting a list of her friends. But his information would be easily available to anyone who frequents the gathering places, as Arnold does. That Arnold has gone to the trouble of researching Connie merely emphasizes that he's had his eye on her for some time. I took special interest in you, such a pretty girl, and found out all about you. When Arnold calls June the poor sad bitch, he correctly guesses Connie's attitude toward her plain older sister, but his conjecture is likely enough, considering what he knows of Connie's narcissism. It's hard to believe that Oates intended special powers for a character who can't even get current teen slang right. Arnold runs through all the expressions he learned, but was no longer sure which one of them was in style. Other so-called symbols of Arnold Friend as supernatural demon are also better explained as the trappings of a pathological pervert. His sign, the X he draws in the air, is no arcane satanic marking of Connie. It is rather the kind of banal, sexually aggressive gesture one would expect of an Arnold Friend, the body language counterpart to his hackneyed gonna get you baby. Friend's clumsy boots do not hide the cloven feet of the devil, as Joan Winslow contends, but the comically vain, height-enhancing rags and cans of Charles Schmidt. The phony name of Arnold Friend does not bespeak Satan in disguise, but is rather an ironically inappropriate alias, probably copied, as Quirk surmises, after Charles Schmidt's pseudonym of Angel Rodriguez. The only demonic power Arnold Friend possesses is the ability to use fear to ravage his victim's humanity, but such power is within the province of any heartless killer. During their final moments, Charles Schmidt's young victims may well have experienced the same hopeless disorientation as Connie does. To reduce Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been to a teenage dream, and to raise Arnold Friend to a superhuman symbol, is to rob the story of its elemental power. Arnold Friends do exist. Charles Schmidt is proof of that, and the evil they do is not safely confined to the literary dream world. So this is really interesting to me, mainly because I disagree with like all of it. I've read this story, probably 50 times since I first read it my senior year of high school, and like I'm not going to pretend like I understand everything about it. I don't, but just based off like what I've read from the author and like other stuff, like other criticism that I've read, I think, and you don't have to agree, that Arnold Friend does represent the devil. But I don't think that means that none of the serial killer stuff is also applicable. I think they can both be true. I think she did base it on this killer at the time. but I think he's just supposed to represent more than that. And I could go through this article and tell you what all I disagree with, but I'm not today because we have a PowerPoint to look at or a PDF. This story is oblivious? Is oblivious the word you meant? What do you mean? Oblivious to what? Huh? Yes. It is very dark. It is definitely very dark. Ominous, maybe? Is that what you meant? It is very dark. It's upsetting. And it doesn't end well for Connie. Like, however you interpret the ending, it's not good. Okay, so this is a little bit more about, well, the reason that they're bringing up the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Number one, this story does have like some fairy tale-ish elements to it. It's like a very dark, disturbing fairy tale in some ways. And one that gets kind of paralleled a lot is the Pied Piper of Hamelin. And one reason for that is that killer, Charles Schmidt, was known as the Pied Piper of Tucson. So this is not like a full-on explanation of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, but it's just some like background of the real guy that the like fairy tale is based off of. In 1284, a long time ago, while the town of Hamelin was suffering from a rat infestation, a piper dressed in multicolored clothing appeared, claiming to be a rat catcher. He promised the mayor a solution to their problem with the rats. The mayor, in turn, promised to pay him for the removal of the rats. According to some version of the story, the promised sum was 1,000 guilders, whatever currency that is. The piper accepted and played his pipe to lure the rats into the Weser River, where all but one drowned. Despite the piper's success, the mayor reneged on his promise and refused to pay him the full sum, even going so far as to hint that he brought the rats himself in an extortion attempt. The piper left the town angrily, vowing to return later to take revenge. On St. John and Paul's Day, while the Hamelinites were in church, the piper returned dressed in green like a hunter playing his pipe. In so doing, he attracted the town's children. 130 children followed him out of town and into a cave and were never seen again. Depending on the version, at most 3 children remained behind. One was lame and could not follow quickly enough. The second was deaf and could therefore not hear the music. And the last was blind and unable to see where he was going. These 3 informed the villagers of what had happened when they came out of the church. Other versions relate, and this is more fairy tale version, that the Pied Piper led the children to the top of Koppelberg Hill, where he took them to a beautiful land or a place called Koppenberg Mountain or Transylvania, or that he made them walk into the Weser as he did with the rats, and that they all drowned. Some versions state that the piper returned the children after payment, or that he returned the children after the villagers paid several times the original amount of gold. So this story has been around literally since 1284, and research has been conducted for centuries, but no explanation for the historical event is universally accepted as true. The rats were first added to the story in 1559 and are not in the earlier accounts. So obviously, I think you can probably make some parallels between Arnold Friend and the Pied Piper. A lot of theories suggest that children died of some natural causes, such as disease or starvation, or that the piper was a symbolic figure of death. Others have suggested that the children left Hamelin to be a part of a pilgrimage, a military campaign, or even a new children's crusade, but never returned to their parents. These theories see the unnamed piper as their leader or recruiting agent. The townspeople made up this story instead of recording facts to avoid the wrath of the church or the king. Emigration of children who were sold because they wouldn't inherit property, possibly a psychopathic pedophile. These are all theories. So the question here is, what function does the Pied Piper serve for parents, and what function does it serve?
I don't know what you mean by. Hey Siri, your name is Piper Leader or a recruiting agency made up the story instead of recording facts of the church and the king. Immigration of children who were sold because they were property, possibly a psychopathic pedophile. These are all theories. How about a web search for it?
No, thank you. I don't know what, like, I don't even say, hey Siri, and it works. I don't know how that happened. Ghosts, guys. It's ghosts. I'm not going to dwell on that question for very long because it's already 2:45. So I want to get moving on this. So this is actually a real picture, or a couple real pictures of the guy, Charles Schmidt, that we think she based the story off of. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit, and you can kind of tell from this black and white picture in particular that he's like done some stuff to change his appearance. Like he's wearing pale makeup. This little thing on his face is not real. His eyebrows are too dark. I think he put shoe polish in his hair or something to make it blacker. But this was from Time Magazine, or okay, there was an article from Time Magazine, and then the Arizona Daily Star wrote an article about the article. Charles Schmidt facing charges of murder in the deaths of 3 Tucson teenage girls is described in this week's Time Magazine as a swinger who always had wheels, money, tall tales, and an inexhaustible supply of available girls' phone numbers. The news magazine also said Schmidt went to bizarre lengths to build his image, and that's what we were talking about. And this is really similar to what Arnold Friend does. He added 3 inches to his meager frame by stuffing rags and folded tin cans into his black leather boots. He dyed his hair raven black, wore pancake makeup, pale cream lipstick, and mascara, the magazine said. This doesn't sound like a man I would like follow willingly. He sounds like he looks crazy. Time also reported that Schmidt's supply of cash was from a generous weekly dole from his mother. Schmidt bragged to the boys, the story said, that the money came from smuggling cars into Mexico, to the girls that it came from women whom he taught 100 ways to make love. Schmidt landed in jail after Richard Bruns, 19, turned informer and told the police that Schmidt had taken him into the desert and shown him the bodies of Gretchen and Wendy Fritz and boasted that he had killed them. Bruns also told police that Schmidt had shown him a grave in another desert location in June of '64, shortly after Eileen Rowe, 15, disappeared from her home. Acting on the Bruns story, police also rounded up John Saunders and Mary Ray French. Okay. This is more about this. They said, according to their statement, Schmidt, who was dating Mary French, and Saunders were at Mary's house the night of May 31st, 1964, when Schmidt idly wondered if they could kill someone and get away with it, like you do. He suggested Eileen, a bright, pretty student who had once stood Saunders up for a date, and the others agreed. Mary French persuaded the girls to go for a drive with them. She was taken about 5 miles into the desert, where Schmidt and Saunders walked her down to a dry stream bed and hit her on the head with rocks until she died. Time also hints at a curtain of silent conspiracy. It said, almost as fantastic as the murders themselves was a disclosure that at least 30 teenagers, all friends of Schmidt's, had apparently heard him brag about the crimes and said nothing. Confided one 16-year-old co-ed at Tucson's Palo Verde High School. A lot of people knew, but it was already too late. Telling would have just made it tough on everyone. Schmidt was convicted, escaped from prison several times, but was always caught and died in prison, but was always caught. Eventually? Was always caught after he escaped. And died in prison in '75 after he was attacked by several other prisoners who stabbed him numerous times. So I think we can kind of, if we're, taking his nickname seriously, the Pied Piper of Tucson, you can kind of make a connection there, because it's not necessarily that he's like leading 200 kids anywhere, but like if he continually, it's not the same word, if he continually is like killing young people and others know about it, they are kind of like following him into his criminal career or whatever, and not saying anything. That's bizarre. You feel like somebody would say something, but they said it was already too late, and telling would have just made it tough on everyone. We can come back to some of this stuff if we have time, but some literary devices that we should know, particularly for this story. Allegory, that's an important one. And that whole first article was kind of about like, is this an allegory or is it meant to be read as realistic? And an allegory is a story, poem, or picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, typically a moral or political one. And that's kind of how I read it. Clearly not everybody does, but an archetype is a symbol, usually an image, which recurs often enough in literature to be recognizable as an experience of one's literary experience. I don't know what I just read. To be recognizable as an element of one's literary experience as a whole. So we could probably think about what possible archetypes there might be. Ooh, this looks so ugly. It's like stretched out. Ooh. Archetypes fall into two major categories: characters and situations or symbols. It's easiest to understand them with the help of examples. So these are some of the most common archetypes. There's the hero or heroine, which is the one that ultimately might fulfill a necessary task and restore fertility, harmony, justice, whatever, to a community. They usually experience some type of initiation. There's a father-son conflict, usually resulting in separation during childhood or from an external source when the individuals meet as men, and where the mentor often has a higher place in the affections of the hero than the natural parent. Ooh, like Harry Potter, because not that he has a conflict with his dad, but he's never known his dad because he died when he was 1. And so all these other people kind of fill a father figure role in his life. Oh, I just came up with that. The devil figure represents evil incarnate. They might offer worldly goods, fame, or knowledge to the protagonist in exchange for possession of the soul or integrity. This figure's main aim is to oppose the hero in his or her quest. We can definitely see that with Arnold Friend, because he keeps saying things to Connie about how like he's going to take her somewhere nice or like give her all kinds of things. It's going to be fun. He's going to show her what love is, and like all these things that sound appealing, except for the fact that she knows she has to like go away with this strange, creepy man. That's not great. The outcast, which is a figure that's banished from a community for some crime, real or imagined. The outcast is usually destined to become a wanderer. The temptress, one whose physical beauty might be the downfall of the hero. The star-crossed lovers, which that phrase comes from Romeo and Juliet. They're engaged in a love affair that's fated to end in tragedy for one or both of them because of any number of reasons. The scapegoat, the one who gets blamed for everything, regardless of whether he or she is actually at fault. A good example of that is Snowball from Animal Farm, if you guys remember reading that. Everything bad that's going on is really Napoleon's fault, but then he drives Snowball off the farm and tells everybody that everything that happened was Snowball's fault. And the shrew, which is just a nagging, bothersome wife that's always battering her husband with verbal abuse. I've got several examples from other classes, but I don't think it's stuff y'all have read. Some symbols and situations that could be archetypal. The task, and their example here is Frodo's task to keep the ring safe in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy. They're like, this character or group of characters is driven to complete some huge duty. The quest, and a lot of this stuff is like hero's journey type of stuff too. That's when the characters are searching for something. Their actions, thoughts, and feelings center around the goal of completing this quest. I'm sure no one here has ever read Pilgrim's Progress. The only reason I did was because I had Bible classes when I was homeschooled, and the whole thing is like a huge allegory for the Bible. The loss of innocence, which is exactly what it sounds like. Loss of innocence through sexual experience, violence, any other means. I think our story here definitely shows that. The initiation, which is the process by which a character is brought into another sphere of influence, usually into adulthood. I'm not familiar with their example, so I'm not going to give it. Water can be a symbol of life, cleansing, or rebirth. It's a strong life force and is often depicted as a living, reasoning force. And the battle between good and evil, that one is pretty apparent. Usually good triumphs over evil, but not always. This is not, I don't think that we're going to do this, but I haven't actually looked at y'all's prompt yet, but these are things that you might want to think about for the prompt. You could write a feminist critical interpretation of it. Women are oppressed spiritually, psychologically. That word just like eluded me for a second. Mentally and physically by societal norms created by men. So this story can be a feminist allegory. If you support that, you could say that she is forced to go with Arnold Friend and surrender herself to him, whatever that might mean. Or you could say that she chooses to go with him of her own free will. There's arguments to be made for either side. I can't wait to discuss this story. You could say that the story is a dream. There's certainly a lot of language in it that has like dreamlike imagery. There's an argument to be made that she dreams the experience and sort of perceives herself as making a noble sacrifice for her family. If you don't agree with that, you would think the story actually happens. She does think that though, and there's that bit at the end where he's talking about her family and he says something like, not one of them would have done this for you, meaning that they wouldn't have sacrificed themselves. He keeps saying that like, if you don't come with me, then I'll come here for all of your family. And like, you don't want to keep me waiting until they come back, because then it's not going to be good for anybody. And so she goes with him essentially to save her family. You could argue that Arnold Friend is the devil. And you could kind of look back at these archetypes and consider this journey into temptation and use that devil archetype for Arnold Friend. You don't have to think that. You could argue that he's not the devil, but you would have to provide evidence that he's not. You could say that he is a savior. We'll talk more about the Bob Dylan stuff later, but he might be closely aligned with Bob Dylan based on the description and the fact that the story is dedicated to Bob Dylan. So he might be sort of an allusion to Bob Dylan, who some people sort of looked at as like a savior or messiah for the masses, because through music, he showed people the way to truth. If you want to argue that, you would have to have some pretty solid musical references. I think this is also stuff you guys could write about for your essay, which I will be assigning next week. So maybe keep this stuff in mind. Or you could think that he's not a savior, but you have to support that too. Okay, that's the end. I feel like there was one or two things I wanted to just come back to. But no, I don't remember what they were. Not that. Okay, I'm just going to go back to this then and talk about why I don't agree with it, since we have a few minutes left. I do think that Arnold Friend kind of represents the devil. People can get really into this interpretation. In fact, Sully wrote a good paper about it 2 years ago, and got really detailed with a lot of like devil mythology and stuff. It was very good. But you like the fact that I think it made mention of like the cloven hooves being like camouflaged in his boots. That could be a thing. The fact that he like tries to make himself taller or like can't stand correctly in his shoes. I think you can read that as just plain old, like he's trying to fit in with the teenagers, which is exactly what Charles Schmidt did. He's trying to make himself like look taller to be more acceptable and like look cooler. You could also think that he maybe has actual cloven hooves and is covering them up. Maybe. There was this whole thing, and this is honestly one of the reasons that I think he is meant to represent more than just like a bad guy. There's all this stuff when he can like perceive what's going on at the barbecue, and he's like seeing them. And this person's argument was that all of that could just be like conjecture if he's been like casing the neighborhood and watching her family, listening in on conversations. But I feel like that would be sort of difficult to do even now, even with our with like all the technology we have, all the cyber stalking we can do. You can find out a lot of information about people, but like he knows so much, and so much of it is like so specific. And this person's argument is like he's just making it up as he goes, and that's why he's like right here. It's like it suggests no mystical knowledge. I think it does. I kind of see it as like he's seeing them either like in his mind or like he can see ages and ages in the distance, but he's just like determining what's going on. Yes.
I feel like that's what Ellie's purpose is.
Oh, what do you think it is?
Ellie is the ears. Like he constantly has his ear like on the radio. and
Yeah.
he's comfortable when he doesn't have it. He's the one that listens.
Oh, I like that. I never thought about it that way. Why do you have any idea why he looks like a baby?
I just thought of it as like, and like, Arnold is supposed to be the devil. He's like the older version, and then there's like another version of the devil where it's like he was one who was kicked out, who was a child.
Oh, that's a good idea. I think Sully's thing, and I'm not gonna remember this very well, but there's like some mythology that has like a red devil and a blue devil, and Arnold was the red devil and Ellie was the blue devil. I don't really remember
I
that.
saw it as he was either like another version of the devil, or he was like the ferryman in Greek mythology.
Yeah, because he's driving the whole time, so it'd be like a boatman. Interesting. I'm gonna have to look into that. I like that idea though, because he does always have his ear on the radio, so like kind of listening up. So would you, if that's what you think, are you reading it more realistic or with like a element of mythology, or like
I see it just like both.
both? Yeah, that's what I think too. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think it's more interesting if there's a combination of the two of them. Like, yeah, this, like on the surface, yes, this guy has like come to this girl's house to essentially abduct her and do 2 or 3 things: kidnap, rape, and murder her. But there's nothing to say that like that bad guy can't also be like a legendary evil force. I think it can be both. Okay, the bell's about to ring, so I will talk to you guys tomorrow.